All right, it is exactly 10:15. So we'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully you had safe driving experiences yesterday and today, and that you enjoyed our guest speaker this morning. You are here today to talk about EdFi Credential, and this is a tool that helps you out with your data, and you control the flow of your data by having EdFi Credential set up appropriately. So with that being said, let's get into talking about EdFi Credential. So our objectives today, we're going to focus on learning about what the EdFi Credential application is and all the related terms to it, because it can get to be kind of confusing. We're doing an introduction of the WISE data flow. So how your data goes from your SIS or your other vendor applications into WISE data. You're going to understand the purpose and the function of the EdFi Credential application. Learn how to create a vendor subscription so that your data can move from point A to point B. Verify your data flow. And then the last thing is just touch briefly on vendor conversion and how that impacts what you do with the EdFi Credential application. So let's first start with definitions. I'm sure you've all heard of EdFi, and EdFi we use as a term for a lot of things, but EdFi is in place because of the EdFi Alliance. So the EdFi Alliance has set up a streamlined, standardized process. So they've given us tools for establishing standards for data and a structure all in place to be able to get your data into our system. So it's a standardized process, and EdFi to us is the EdFi application. I'm going to pause for a second and ask a question. This happened to me yesterday, and it is very frustrating. So I don't know what it is with my device, but let's see. Seriously, I have no idea why this isn't working for me. So what we're going to do is change the visual on my screen, and we're just going to extend my desktop and we're going to pretend I know everything without notes. How's that? Do you want to do that? Okay. Thank you, Jada. I thought I tried this out and it was working for me, but no, it's not. Go inside slide 3, Jada. I think I might need to re-record this one separately afterwards. Great. I'm already disconnected. So if you're sharing, we're not seeing what you've got. No, I'm sharing in Teams. Control. You're connected. But it's not moving. Okay, I'm terribly sorry for technical difficulties. I'm beginning to think it's my device now because I ran into the same thing yesterday. So I am going to duplicate my screen because I think that's the only way that's going to make this work. Yeah. That. All right. And I'll get out of Teams. There we go. Okay. So the terms that we're talking about, EdFi Credential, it's short for everything from the EdFi Alliance. So it's talking about our data standards, our structures, all the things that it takes to get your information into the WISE data system. When we talk about credentials, the most common thing that we all think of when we use a system, we have credentials to get into our laptops. We have credentials to get into all of our apps, be it Amazon or your banking account. Those credentials are your username and password. You can think of systems or servers also need credentials too, not quite a username and password, but we'll talk about those in a little bit. And then the EdFi credential system, it's an application that's used by you to be able to control your data. We'll talk more about a little bit more about EdFi credential in a bit. So another term that you'll hear frequently is API. So an application programming interface. And really what it does is it's a between your SIS and our WISE data stores. So if you were at one of the presentations last year, I can't remember which one it was, you showed a little video on what an API is. And you can think of an API as being a waiter. When you go to a restaurant, you're usually not having direct interface with the kitchen, right? You're either punching in something on your phone, picking things from the menu, or you are talking to a waiter. Those systems and the waiter are taking your request to the kitchen and bringing it back to you. That's exactly how the API works with WISE data also. The other thing that the API does is it helps with making sure that all the data that's comes through as we expect it to, that it's following the appropriate standard. So that's why you'll run into L1 errors every once in a while. The API will say, I got your request, but I'm not sure I understand it. And it'll bounce back an error message. So this is actually to kind of blow up the mini picture that we were just looking at. Don't get overwhelmed with it. I'm going to walk you through it. It's kind of like a map. So everything starts with you. You're starting with logging into your laptop, you're logging into your SIS application, and to be able to use any of the WISE applications, you need WISE Secure, right? You need access and permission granted to you to access those systems, and you usually use a Google sign-on. Not a Google sign-on, you use a single sign-on tool, be it WAMS, Google, or something else. First time you log in, it's always good to make sure that you use your WAMS ID if you're going to be using something else. So once you get logged in, you're great. This is perfect, right? You're logged in. You're actually able to put information into your application that you're working with. But to be able to get it to go through to the vendor and to the state, you'll see this little water line here and the EdFi credential application here in blue with the lock. You need the credentials to be able to access the database. So just like you needed your username and password to get into your software, for your SIS to be able to access the API and send data through, they need a vendor subscription that's created in EdFi credential. And from there, your vendor can send information to the API. And it can pull information from other things too. So the immunization product, as well as identity API. From there, once the API says, yes, we got your information, it sends it to a data store. And data store there also goes through some validations. And that's where you end up seeing your information finally in the WISE data portal. And that's where you can also find your L2 errors, because those errors aren't managed by the API. Those are managed by our systems behind the scenes. So hopefully that helps give you sort of an overview and an understanding of how your vendor subscription ties into data flowing from your vended application through to WISE data. So using the Ed5 credential application to create your credentials, it's easy. There's a 3-step process to make sure your information goes from point A to point B. You have to create your credentials. You have to enter them into your product, into your SIS or your special education, discipline vendor, whatever vendor is going to be passing information into WISE data. And then you have to just verify the flow. So it's not too complicated. We're going to start off with the first one. First step in the process is to create the Ed5 credentials. So we talked already about the Ed5 credential tool being a tool that you're used to create your credentials. And the API needs a key and secret. Just like you need a username and password to enter an application to get in access to get into your account. The API has credentials also that the vendor needs to use to be able to send information through. So if you don't have on your team somebody who has access to the Ed5 credential application, you'll need to make a request for it. You'll see usually 2 steps down from the WISE Home item on the menu is request access. You can submit a request access form and that'll go to your district security administrator. We really try to limit that access to being only 1 to 2 people in your agency. So if you are that person, I'm glad you're here hearing all of this. And if you're the backup to that person, just as good. So again, just for security purposes, and because it is an access granting application, we do try to limit that access. So the Ed5 credential application, just like some of our others, the very first time you log in, you will get a message that really is making sure that you understand all the rules around the data that you're going to have access to and the power that you have. So to keep in line with FERPA regulations, we want to make sure that you understand that you respect and honor the big responsibility that's put on you by having access to the Ed5 credential application. So the very first time you go through, you check out these check boxes, you click agree, and hopefully and typically you don't have to revisit those items again the next time you log in. So the first thing is to create a vendor subscription. And when you're an Ed5 credential as an agency, you really have a pretty limited menu of options here. You have an agency menu and that's it. And all the information on here is related to your vendor subscriptions. So to add a subscription, it's as simple as clicking this add button. And from there, you go through the process to create a new subscription. You pick your vendor and you identify the type of access that's going to be needed. So for example, a SIS vendor, you're going to write on all student data. But if you're a SIS, you have a SIS vendor and a special education vendor, you're going to want to pick you're going to write on all data excluding special ed, because you're going to have special ed being written on by your special education vendor. So you'll end up having 2 subscriptions. And then once you do that, simple as that, click Save Changes and move on to the next step. When you go back to the Ed5 credential application on the home screen, then you will see your vendor listed. Now, I know the screenshot is pretty small, but at the very top of the screen, the very first thing that you see is your list of vendors. And if you have a situation where you need help with adding and deleting and updating, or you're switching vendors and you're really confused and not sure what to do next, our help desk is always available to assist you through that process. So I want to do a quick demo here. And I want to minimize my screen. Actually, I think I'm going to save that for last. I'm going to do all 3 demos at the same time at the very end, because I think it's going to be a little bit easier than trying to toggle through the presentations back and forth. So when we get to the end, I'll do a demonstration on how to add in that vendor subscription. So once you have that vendor subscription, yay, right? You got all the information that you need, but the thing is, your vendor doesn't have it. So your product, your SIS vendor product will need that key and secret. If you think about it, that product needs access to the API, and the only way that's going to get it is if you input the key and secret. The key and secret are available to you on that screen that we're just looking at previously. We'll go through that again when we get to the demo. So if you ever have a new subscription and you're not sure what to do with it, you'll need to reach out to your vendor. Because your vendor will either allow you to enter it directly yourself, or they might be a vendor that requires you to send in a help ticket. You never want to email your credentials. Think about it like emailing your username and password. You would never do that. So same sort of rules apply with the key and secret. Again, they're like a username and password, but for the API, not a person. In addition to updating your key and secret, if our URLs change at any time, that happened this past year, so some of you may have run into that situation. So for the information to flow from your SIS vendor to Wise Data, there's a couple things that need to be in place. One is valid secret, a valid key, and the valid URLs. So you can think of those URLs as being paths. You're telling the system what direction to go to get access to and to store data. So this past year, we made some changes, and because of that, those paths changed, and those paths needed to be specific for this year. So establishing connectivity, we kind of talked about this already. Forgive me, I jumped ahead without even looking at the slides here. You want to enter your credentials into the SIS. And again, as I said, that really depends on the vendor. The last thing is to verify your data flow. So great, you've got your key and secret and your URLs entered appropriately into your SIS. And now it's time to affirm that your data is going from where you're sitting to Wise Data. And you can do that by looking in the Wise Data system. Now I have some screenshots up here of the new and improved Wise homepage. And from the Wise homepage, if you scroll down, you can click this checkbox that says read only vendors and API read get transactions. That does something for you in that even if you just want to verify some information that's read only that the SIS vendor pulls from us, it'll show those sorts of requests also. So it helps you out with just making sure that when you're verifying that you're going to get every opportunity to say, yes, I have connectivity. So in this space, underneath the 24-25 school year, if we had sent our data, we should be able to see this as green. And to see more on this, there's a presentation tomorrow morning, same time slot. First thing, going over what's new for 24-25. And on the user end, you'll see the updates not only to this on the homepage, but also what is available on the data quality pages. Demo 2 was to see how to verify data in the Wise Data portal. And again, we'll do that at the very end here. So the last thing that I want to talk about is SIS conversion, as this gets to be kind of the tricky thing, right? When do we start thinking about SIS conversion? When do we make changes? Great, we sign the contract with the vendor, a new vendor. What do we need to do? Well, if you think about this, you now need a new subscription, right? If you've switched vendors, you're going to a new vendor, so you need a new vendor subscription. In addition, you need to make modifications to the existing subscription. And a lot of what you do depends on how that contract is written and what agreements have been made with the vendor. Ultimately, we'd love for you to use the certified vendor list. If you've had a chance to go out there, that certification doesn't say these are all perfect vendors for you to use. What it does mean is that every single one of these vendors have gone through testing to ensure that they can send the data expected to us. But there's other things when you're looking at a vendor that you're interested in, like Do they handle lunches? Do they, what is their customer service like? What's the usability of the application? So there's many things above and beyond. So again, the certified list is not a recommendation list. It's a list of vendors who has successfully proven that they can send data to us. So when you're converting from one system to another, or adding a support thing, or a supporting system like special ed, you're going to have to think about that transition process a little bit. And there is also a really great resource out on the WISE Data website called SysConversion Guidance. So if you're starting to think about it, start early, think about it early, and take a look at that document. So most conversions, if you think about it, the school year ends on June 30th, right? So most conversions, we would be looking at switching in July, adding that new vendor subscription in July. And the old subscription, we would make modifications to after July hits. The big thing is, even if you're thinking about preparing for conversion, you don't necessarily want to make those changes in May because you might actually be impacting the system or the data that you have coming through from the previous vendor. So try to be conscientious of that. And again, we can help out with that if needed. So system overlap, again, we're talking about converting and switching during the calendar years. And if possible, we really like it if you're able to keep your first vendor open until after snapshot, because you're still updating and modifying data for the snapshot all through September, October, November, and hopefully not anything before December or after December 4th, or even earlier than that, hopefully. So keep in mind that when you are making these changes, even though you're now in a new school year, you still need that previous system, or at least some method to get information in for that previous school year from the old vendor. So when you're looking at contract negotiation, this is some great information to pass off to your business team. You want a tool that's going to allow you to enter and edit that prior year information, potentially manually, if you've got the ability. And you want to be able to handle the past 3 years of reporting data, not just merely the prior year. Especially when you're looking at dropouts that 3rd year back, that's really the only errors that we're looking at. So for example, 21-22 school year, which just dropped off, if you were making any updates and error cleanup, that's all great, fine and good, but we're really looking at making sure that dropouts are addressed because we've already taken the snapshot for that year. So there are some great things to think about on the screen for what to take into consideration when you're doing your contract negotiation. And that also helps you out with how you enter information into the EdFi credential application. And if you're converting and you need help, a help ticket is great. We talked about this already too. When you add a new subscription, it's great to add it after July 1st rather than before, and then turn off your old subscription, if possible, after December. In some situations, you'll turn it off earlier depending on what you have in agreement with your vendor for how data is going to get into the system for the previous school year when you're not using them. Demo number 3, which we'll do in a little bit. Not new and worth repeating, just so you know, first day and last day of school are collected from the sessions information in your SIS, and you can see those on the contacts page on the bottom, and you can see them for all schools in the area, so that might be helpful for you in addition to seeing your own school. And when you're on this page also, it's a good thing every beginning of every school year to look at your contacts and make sure that they're updated, so that when CST team or others send information off to you, that they've got a current and valid list. And lastly, we talked about this a little bit last year. We have a great link on the, and actually it's not in the spot anymore. Leave that in. there is a resources page with vendor resources. Those resources are put out there by your vendor. There's a couple key things that we ask for them to put out there that might be a little bit of a duplicate of the help information that you can get from your SIS. The purpose of this is to provide an easy way for our customer service team and for you to get to information. So for example, one of the things that we talked about today was, okay, great, I created my vendor subscription. Now what do I do with this? Well, inside the vendor resources page or link, you should have instructions on how to take care of that, whether it's needing to create a support ticket or go to the specific page and update this, this, and this. If you don't see something there that you expect to see, like instructions on how to handle and entering those credentials, reach out to your vendor. If there's something else that you'd like to see out there, we also have asked for how to handle names, legal names versus preferred names, as well as some information on immigration and another one with language. So keep in contact with your vendors. And if you also think that there's something that's really important that would be applicable to everybody, not just you, that would be helpful, let us know, because we're more than willing also to reach out to vendors to ask them to add things to. All right. So thank you so much for your time. That's actually the end of the presentation for EdFi Credential. But at this moment, I'm going to step off of this PowerPoint presentation, and we'll go into the EdFi Credential application just so you can kind of see these things working in person. Escape. So hopefully, no, you're not seeing. Duplicate these displays.